command blocks, the most powerful blocks in Minecraft. But how do they really work? Before we can ever use command blocks, we have to make sure our world supports them. So we're going to go to our settings, scroll down to cheats, and make sure that they're enabled. Then we're going to go down to command blocks enabled and make sure that that is also on. Next, we're going to go up to here and make sure our permission level is operator. You need to be an operator in order to use commands and use command blocks. Now we're ready to give ourselves a command block. But if you notice, in the creative menu, there are no sections for command blocks or any of the other special blocks that you can give yourself in the game. You need to give it to yourself using commands. If you're on a keyboard or on a computer, you can hit T and then /. Or you could just hit /, and that'll bring up the command menu. If you're on a mobile device, like a phone or a tablet, there'll be a button on screen that you can click to open the chat, and then you can also type /. And if you're on a console, the same applies. There'll be a button on your controller that'll bring up the menu, and then you could just type /. Next, we're going to type /give, because we're giving ourselves something. And then all the options for giving people something will appear. Now, we're not going to concern ourselves with most of these today. The only one that's important is @s or just your name. If you're on a keyboard, you can hit tab to autocomplete that and scroll all the way down to @s or your name. But if you're on any other device, you're just going to have to type it in. Next, we're going to see all the items available to us in the game. We're not going to concern ourselves with most of them. We're just going to type COMM, and 4 options will appear. The second one, command block minecart, is special. It's an entity and has different rules, so we're just going to ignore that one for today. We're only going to talk about command blocks, chain command blocks, and repeating command blocks. So we're going to autofill command block or just type it in. And we're just going to hit enter, and that's going to give us exactly 1 command block. Now that we have it, let's place it. There are a number of different ways to interface with a command block, but all of them rely on the interaction or use button. So if you're using a controller, it will be this button, the left trigger. Don't use right trigger if you're using a controller, because that deletes it. And for touch, it doesn't say here, but you'll just tap on the command block. Tapping and holding will delete it. But if we go back to keyboard and mouse, you'll see that button 1, button 3, and button 2. Button 1 is left click. It's the left button on the mouse. Button 2 is right click, the right button on the mouse. So you want to right click the command block to interact with it. Just treat it like you would a chest or a furnace. Whatever button you use to interact with that object is the same button you're going to use to interact with the command block. Very simple. So we're going to interact with it. And that will show us the interface of the command block. So let's talk about each one of these sections. Up in the top left is the name of the command block. By default, it'll be saying hover note in grayed out letters. That just means it's going to show up as an exclamation mark in chat whenever it activates a command. But you can type whatever you want here. So let's type command helper, so we know that this is a block that's helping us learn how to use commands and command blocks. Over in the top right, you'll see a section that is called command input, and that's exactly what it says. It's where you input your commands. By default, there'll be nothing here. I just have the command we used earlier for demonstration. You'll notice, though, that there are some things that are different between typing a command in chat with a command menu and using a command block. There's the first, which is that the command blocks don't accept every command. If you remember earlier, I used the command, or said you could use the command @s to give yourself a command block. That's a little different from the command blocks. They do not have an inventory, and because they're the self in this scenario, because they're the one operating the command, they cannot give themselves anything, including other command blocks. So you're going to have to use a different type of syntax or wording for your command. So here I used @p. And what does @p mean? Well, right here is the suggestions for how you could format your commands. And if you look at the second one, @p means nearest player. And the nearest player is usually the person using the command block. But if you have other people in the world, and you want to make sure it always goes to you or to someone else, you type either your name or their name. And this is my name typed wrong because I play with caps too much. You have to remember you have to spell it correctly and use the right capitalization. So you're going to want to type in your name or their name, the one that appears in chat. So when you type something and say it, that exact name is what you will put here. It's also the same name you have for Xbox Live. Now if you notice with this little command block window, there's a plus button. That plus button just simply opens up the command menu so that it covers the entire screen of the interface. And that's so there's no other things in your way. You could see exactly what you're typing. And if you're typing a particularly long command, this will expand it so you can see the entire command. Now the second thing makes command blocks different from people is that it does not give you any suggestions for how to type your command. If you notice when I was playing with it, it doesn't say, oh, you should use @p or @s. It says nothing. And that means if you're using commands, you're going to want to know how to use them before you put them into a command block. It's quite simple as that. And there's a number of different ways, if you're not familiar with how to write the command, that you can know how to write it before you put it in the command block and get frustrated because it's not working. The most easy way is just simply to do what we did before and type in your command and see if it actually functions the way you think it would. So, for example, we would type in the exact same thing we did before, and we would see exactly how to write the command, and we would have the benefit of the suggestions of the game. The game would tell us exactly what we're typing and if it's going to work or whatever. And that can be an easy way to see if your command is actually going to work. And in that way, you'll know exactly what to type when you go to the command block. And there are a couple of other different ways to actually see if the command block's working. And one of them is down here in the bottom right section. And that's the previous output section. You'll see it has a little button here. That's to toggle it on and off. Very simple. But here is where it gets a little bit more complicated. This tells you exactly what the command block did last. And right now it says it gave me exactly one command block. It says my name, it says command block, it says 1. Very simple. But it'll also tell you when something goes wrong, or if it didn't fulfill the command fully. So if you're using some command that does a lot of things at the same time, it'll tell you how much of it did, of that big thing. So it'll put the number, it'll tell you all those different things. But if you typed in the command incorrectly, it will tell you using syntax error. And in order to actually see when your command has inputted incorrectly, though, you need to know how to activate it. And that's over here in the bottom left, where it says condition and Redstone. Condition is a little bit more complicated than Redstone. By default, this type of command block, the orange one, is set to unconditional. And the unconditional means it's only going to rely on this right here to function. It just means that this condition is deactivated. Conditional, though, is where it gets a little more interesting. Conditional is when those arrows matter. And it's when another command block is pointing into this one with those arrows. When it's set to conditional, this command block will only activate its command if that command block pointing into it also activates its command. So it's just saying, if he works, so will I. If he does not, I will not. So it only works on the condition that the block pointing into it also works. Unconditional means it doesn't care what the command block pointing into it is doing. As long as it gets power, using this way, it's going to activate. So now let's talk about it this way, and that is Redstone. The first option is pretty self-explanatory. you need a Redstone input in order to activate it. And that's a lever, a button, and a couple of other different ways. And I'll show you a little bit of those later in the video. Always active is different for the other types of command blocks. And I'll show you the other types of command blocks here in a second. Always active means for this type of command block, when you hit the X, it activates only once, right when you exit the inventory or the interface of the command block. And for this type of command block, an impulse command block, the orange command block, that's all it'll do. It'll just activate once every time you click this. So that's not too useful for this command block. The last thing we're going to look at is the different types of command blocks. And that's where it says block type right underneath the name. There are 3 different types. Right now, the one you gave yourself is an impulse command block. That's the orange one that we've been talking about the whole time. There's 2 other types, though, and you can see that they're listed right here. The first of the other 2 is the green chain command block, and I'll get into him a little bit later. And then there's the repeat command block, and it's blue. And it just repeats commands over and over again. And I'll show that a little bit later. For now, we're just going to use an impulse command block. If you notice down here, right underneath the previous output section, it says block type, condition, and redstone, just like it says over here. And that is the previous type of block it was, and the settings it had when it was last activated. You see, even though it said it needs redstone now, the last time it did anything, when it gave me one command block, it was set to always active, unconditional, and it was an impulse command block. And if we just simply change one thing we have typed into the command, like removing that last K, and switch this back to always active as an impulse command block, then exit out of the interface, and re-enter, we can see it will tell us there was a syntax error. Unexpected command block means that it did not understand what that meant because I misspelled it. And then it'll say at exactly where the error was in the command. And the error was after the /give at P, and then it highlights the command block. Now let's talk about command block activation. The first way to activate a command block is with redstone. And redstone needs to be pointing directly into a command block to activate it. And as you can see here, each one of these ways point directly into the command block and activate it every single time. However, over here, you'll see they're not pointing directly into the command block, so they do not activate him. The next thing to know about redstone activation is what type of block you're powering. Here, this is an opaque block, as most blocks in the game are. Opaque blocks power the ones that are next to them, or adjacent to them. And as you can see, it'll power both command blocks. However, there are quite a few blocks in the game that are transparent, which means they do not power blocks. And that includes glass, slabs, stairs, and fences, and all other blocks that do not occupy a full space. And as you can see here, because it's transparent, it does not power any of the adjacent blocks, unlike the dark oak. And what is important to remember is that command blocks themselves are opaque. They will power command blocks that are next to them. Lastly, we'll talk about conditionality, which is what I talked about earlier just a little bit. If you look at this command block, you can see, as I said earlier, it's trying to give a command block to itself, which does not work. It can't give it to itself, which means that this command block will output nothing. It fails in its output. This command block, however, is just saying hello. It's always going to function, it's always going to work, unless it's set to conditional. And when it's set to conditional, a command block changes its appearance to have a little dimple in the bottom of its arrow. Now, this command block will only run when this command block does as well. If you look, this command block is pointing into him, so he will rely on the output of this command block. And even though they're both going to be powered, because this one's powered and it powers him, neither activates. However, when I change it back to unconditional, this command block no longer cares what this one is doing. He only cares that he's getting power, and he'll always get power because this one will power it. And as you can see, only he fires. Now let's talk about each command block in a little bit more detail. The one right in front of me here is the orange impulse command block, and he just fires once every time he's activated. So if it's on needs redstone, it'll just fire once. And as I talked about before, you can rename impulse command blocks, and a very simple command you can give it is to speak, which is using the /say command. And here I've named it after myself, and I have it say hi. You can also give it slightly more complicated commands, like the one we gave at the beginning of the video to give ourselves a command block. And even more complicated still, we can give it a clear command. And before we activate it again, let's talk about how it can also activate using always active. Always active means that whenever you exit the interface of the command block, it activates just once. And as you can see, it's only activated once to erase my inventory. The /clear command erases one's inventory. You can also specify what specific things you want erased from their inventory, but here I have specified nothing, and I've just put a selector for me, which means that it's just going to clear absolutely everything from my inventory. Next, I will briefly go over the repeating command block. Repeating command blocks are not very different from impulse command blocks, except they do exactly what their name suggests. They repeat their command over and over again. This is the same type of command I had before. It's speaking, but using say and then something. And when I hit the button, it's going to say hi a bunch. And the same thing comes to if we can make it give us something. If we make this repeating command block give us something, it's going to give us a bunch. And you can see that the command block in the fourth slot was twitching. It's because it's adding to the stack. And as well, you can also clear someone's inventory with a repeating command block. And that will continuously clear my inventory. So if I set this to always active, which just means that it's always going to work as soon as I hit this X button, I'm not going to be able to add anything to my inventory. Every time I click on this, it's just deleting it immediately. Just remember that that's how repeating command blocks can be very dangerous. If they're set to always active, or if they have a lever on them, continuously powering them, they can quickly break your world or make it very hard to do anything in your world. The last type of command block I'm going to be talking about today is the green chain command block. And just as the names of the other types gives away what they do, the chain command block works in a chain with other command blocks. Very simple. Just as simple, we only need to press this button to activate all three of these command blocks. And even though these two are not powered, bear in mind, this block is powered, and it powers the command block next to it, but it doesn't power these. These still fire. That's because chain command blocks don't care about redstone. They only care about the activation of the block that's pointing into them, the command block that's pointing into them, which means you can have a very, very long chain as long as each one is pointing into the next one in the chain. You can even go around corners and stuff like that. But that also means if this is a chain command block, the very first one is a chain command block, it no longer works. The first block in the chain has to be an impulse or repeating command block. And that's because they can accept redstone, but these can't. So in order to activate all of them, this one has to be able to accept redstone. And as you can see, it is accepting redstone. And because these guys rely on the output of the first one, they fire multiple times, just as this one does. And look at that. If you're playing with me in your own world, you just used three of the most powerful blocks in the game. And if you weren't following along, and I'm looking at you, then you now know more about these three blocks than most players of Minecraft will ever learn the entire time they're playing this game. These blocks are so obscure and so powerful, and most people never adventure to this side of Minecraft, that many never know the benefits of using these very powerful blocks. And if you already knew all of this, or are looking for more about these blocks and the other very powerful blocks in this game, there's plenty more to say. So subscribe and leave a like so I know that that's the kind of content you want more of. I hope you had a great day today, and if not, there's always tomorrow, and I'll see you then.